together here the stakeholders and resources needed to implement wildfire, forest, watershed health, and climate resilience initiatives. Anna East works behind the scenes to ensure everything goes well. Also helping Anna East today and working behind the scenes is the Finance and Operations Associate for Pepperwood, Isabel Logan. Thanks to Roberta McIntyre and FireSafe Sonoma, we are simulcasting this program this afternoon, and she'll tell us how we can access it later at the end of the program. Our timekeeper is going to be Madam Rosa, and at close to the minute mark of your remarks, we'll give you a little hand signal of some sort to let you know that it's time to wrap up. So, Pepperwood's Reserve sits within the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather in this beautiful place and give our respect to its first inhabitants. We're gathered today to learn from each other about how to help our forests be safer and more resilient. Ben Nichols, who I think is actually on the way, will be here in a while, once told me, we need to get in front of wildfires so we don't have to chase them from behind. This is really pretty profound, actually, very simply stated. Today, we encourage everyone to help our first responders be safer so they won't have to chase the fires from behind. Now I'd like to give you a little snippet about Taking Action for Living Systems, who is working with the FireSafe councils up here. TALS believes that an effective response to current environmental and social challenges must come from a purposeful blending of what's good for nature and what's good for people. We are intentionally not competitive with the local efforts. Rather, we provide a local organizing framework for implementing the existing efforts to reach common objectives. While there is commonality in the wildfire risk reduction interventions that we've all either used or have heard about, each specific area or geography has unique risk reduction challenges, enterprise opportunities, socioeconomic characteristics, and organizational challenges. TALS is working with the Diamond Mountain Mark-West communities because this area is a critically important biodiverse landscape that has experienced several wind-driven catastrophic wildfires in the last 5 years. And wildfires, as we know, don't honor geographical boundaries, but they don't honor political boundaries either. Your 2 FireSafe councils recognize that to work at scale, we need to encourage Napa and Sonoma counties to help bridge the political boundaries to bring funding and other needed resources. Larger geographies stand a better chance to attract funding and better protect individual landowners because their neighbors are also implementing fire prevention strategies. So that's just a little bit about TALS, and certainly we can talk about more afterwards if you'd like. Now I'd like to introduce our first 2 speakers. Lynn Garrick is chair of the Upper Mark-West FireSafe Council. Lynn, you want to come up? Has lived in her watershed community for almost 50 years. She lost her home, cottage, and 80-foot access bridge in the 2017 Tubbs fires. She has since rebuilt and lives back on her land. And Michael Riggy is a member of the Diamond Mountain FireSafe Council. Come on up, Michael. His home and property are situated in Sonoma County, but have a Calistoga address and access, so straddles the Napa-Sonoma County line. The glass fire came very close to his home. They were evacuated, he and his wife, Linda Lee. So, you guys, take it over. Let's stand up here. Keep me company.
Mountain, Upper Northwest.
Yeah.
So you can tell from Dee's introduction, if I've been in this watershed for 50 years, I either bought my property when I was 5 years old, or I'm over 70. So it's one of those. So we represent 2 fire safe councils. I think we have other fire safe councils represented in the room. And fire safe councils basically are formed throughout the state of California to do education, to bring neighbors together, to research funding and apply for grants, and to try and help our friends and neighbors become more prepared for fire and respond more effectively to fire. In our case, the Diamond Mountain and Upper Northwest Watershed Fire Safe Councils have been working together for a little over 2 years, I think it is now. And I was asked to speak a little bit tonight about our successes and our challenges. So I think oftentimes when we think about our successes, we think about Sonoma County gave us a grant, CAL FIRE gave us a grant, and that's one of the ways that we go around to our neighbors and say, we've been really fortunate to have a lot of financial support from funders. And so I think the defensible space projects that we've done, the shaded fuel breaks, the roadside clearing, the education and workshops that we've done, those are our successes, but that's actually not what I think our greatest strength is. I think our greatest strength is knowing you people in this room, because the more we know our neighbors, the more we know the people that live on our road, the more we can call up someone individually and say, can you come to this meeting tonight? Because we really would like to have a good showing. The more we can understand how we fit together with our individual parcels and our individual interests into a larger community, that's really where our strength is. And our strength is knowing what we have and being able to share that with experts like we have tonight, or with our firefighting partners, or with the other organizations like Pepperwood, who actually shares much more knowledge in our direction. But it's being able to build those bridges between fire safe councils, communities, organizations, or elected officials, because I don't think I know more about my land, but I think I know my land better than anybody else does, and I think you know your land better or more personally, and that's what. So if I switch to challenges, I think our challenge is still to know you better, because we need to know more of you. We need to know in more depth what your dreams are for your property. We need to know how your dream and your dream and your dream fit together, so that when we start to work on plans and projects, when we write grants, we have to be really sure that we're respecting what individual property owners want to do with their land, but we also have to be able to teach each other why it's to our mutual benefit to work together on these plans. So I think that's our greatest strength and our greatest challenge is more and more building the network of landowners, being sensitive to what you need, getting your input, getting your perspective. So if you haven't done so already, before you leave this evening, there are sign-in sheets for both the Upper Northwest Watershed Council, Fire Safe Council, and the Diamond Mountain Fire Safe Council. And there's a map out there that shows the Upper Northwest, and then you kind of look around the edges to figure out where the Diamond Mountain fits with us, where we come together. So we'd really like to be able to call you before we write the next grant. We'd like to be able to look at things in a bigger perspective. And as Dee said, that's our next challenge. We're doing a pretty good job on individual homes. We're doing a pretty good job on, maybe not, we're making progress on roads and fuel breaks, but we do not know how to get to the next level. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a forester. I don't know how to look at the different models of what's possible and figure out what combination of treatments and strategies are going to be more effective. I don't know how to go to Susan and say, this would really work. This is worth the county investing in. I don't know how to do that because I don't have that skill set. But I think that's what we're here for tonight, is to say, how do we get to that next scale? How do we learn? And then how do we work together to put that into action? Because obviously the third challenge is money and nobody has enough, but we definitely want to be able to be competitive for whatever is out there. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight and hope that we stay in touch. I want to thank the people that I know we have firefighters and other organizations at home watching on YouTube. And if you, when you leave here, we'll share that YouTube stream. That's what we're really banking on, is that we can work together, move to that next level of scale, find those dollars we need, and make us much safer in our watersheds. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. That was very well put and very eloquent. Now I'm going to feel like a kindergartner after that. But as Dee said, Linda and I have been living at the top of Diamond Mountain Road, right on the county line for a long time, and we're both on this the Diamond Mountain Fire Safe Council with 12 other people on our steering committee. And our Fire Safe Council is comprised of about 203 parcels and 3,570 acres or so, and spans all the way from Bay Park up to Corbin Canyon Road and then up onto the Mycomas Ridge there. And about 70% of our district there burned up in the glass fire. So these fire safe councils are bounded by county lines, but fire not so much. So we've been worried about fire for a long time, since the Valley Fire in Lake County in 2015. And that's when I started looking into grants for people like us who do not have deep pockets and wanted to do something to mitigate the situation, because it's scary. You know, tinder dry woods there, you know, way out there at the end of this windy road. So anyway, turns out to get any kind of grant money, you need a forest management plan. And that's kind of a complicated deal, which now part of this grant that we have recently gotten through with the help of TALS. You know, by the way, that is something to celebrate. We got this grant, and that's a part of that is part of that money will go for planning, which is really that's an example of how when we come together, you know, the red tape and bureaucracy in getting a forest management plan is considerable. And I kind of puzzled through it. It took me a long time. People in the Mark West watershed kind of, you know, were big inspiration to the formation of our Fire Safe Council. They've been, they were ahead of us on this. And it's been really helpful to be able to learn from their experiences. So anyway, I got this forest management plan, and that enabled me to apply for a $7,000 grant through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is affiliated with USDA. And we were able to do a treatment, kind of a shaded fuel break treatment around the 5 acres right around our house. And I think that's probably what saved our bacon in the glass fire, that work had been done, aside from all the other, you know, efforts that we all hopefully are making. But the forest management plan is important and not that easy to do. So this is, anyway, as I said, I think that's a significant part of how helpful TALS has been, and you know, there's other, as we'll hear today from Joe here, there's other technological assists that we might be able to take advantage of in the future going forward. You know, most of us know about home hardening and defensible space, which are both, of course, super important. But in the case of these large wind-driven wildfires, evacuation is often the only viable, you know, strategy. You know, I'm no expert, but there are experts in the field of, you know, fire science and fire behavior that have, you know, suggested some of these you know, methods like ridgetop fire breaks, shaded fuel breaks that have proven successful in other fire-prone areas like Tahoe and whatnot. Anyway, but doing something on a comprehensive landscape scale, that's really easy to accomplish. It requires the participation of individuals and landowners like ourselves here, And because the counties, you know, and the state and CAL FIRE, they're not going to do it for us. It's too big a job. And so in a way, I mean, it forces us to really take a grassroots approach. It's not going to be top down. It's got to be all of us, that everybody gets on the same page. So we're already working across county lines just on our own limited basis. We've got a grant to improve the fire access that goes from the end of Diamond Mountain Road all the way out to Petrified Forest Road. And this was critically important during the last fire. We were told that, you know, firefighters and equipment and evacuation happened on this road, and really lowered the number of homes that were destroyed in our area. But we had to get participation and permission from each individual landowner, because everybody likes their privacy and they don't want additional traffic. And so we've had to be respectful, isn't that right? So anyway, so communication and respect are key aspects of this. Getting everyone on the same page has been quite a process. And in some ways, this little project was small and, you know, fairly focused, but it takes hours and hours of volunteer time even before the contract work starts. So that exemplifies the complexity of this work, and multiply that by 1,000 and you have some idea of the challenges that we face. So while this post-fire cleanup it's ongoing, and it has become clear to many of us that we have an opportunity to reimagine what our forests could look like in the future against this backdrop of drought and climate change that we're looking at. But we need science and planning and leadership from our elected officials and from our, you know, local stakeholders, our cross-county communities here for this to happen. And this TALS and Diamond Mountain Mark West collaboration gives us a chance to think about the larger landscape scale picture, in addition to determining where to locate our fire breaks to slow fires. Can also help us understand the interconnectedness of our neighborhoods, like Lynn was talking about. I think this is, you know, it's an opportunity as well as a challenge. So I have some comments here from some of my fellow Fire Safe Council members, and that in some ways this collaboration can be the best of both worlds. We can access the resource conservation districts from both counties, and we frequently do. And we have both Fire Safe Sonoma and Napa Community Firewise Foundation. And we have both Supervisor Dillon and Supervisor Gorin, who are both on our side. So thank you so much for being here. This is, you know, the kind of leadership that we need. So with leadership and trust we have been able to develop in our Diamond Mountain and Upper Northwest Fire Safe Councils, we already have groups of residents who have demonstrated they are willing to cooperate and take action. TALS has created the overview for proposing and designing fuel reduction and restoration plans. And we have contacts and relationships on the ground level to help implement plans in manageable sections. And today's meeting is a great way to get more of us together on these ongoing projects. So thank you all for being here. And that's all I have to say.
Next, we're honored to hear from Napa and Sonoma supervisors who serve your districts. First, Napa County Supervisor Diane Dillon, followed by Sonoma County Supervisor Susan Gorin.
Good evening, everyone. Applauding all of you for being here. This is really critical, your participation in this effort, because this is exactly the kind of thing led by TALS, this cross-county, I'm looking like the maps behind me because I've been looking at that map there. This cross-county collaboration from the ground up is just, it's so essential to success for getting the shaded fuel breaks or whatever else it is in terms of vegetation management. That is going to be the best thing to protect your homes and your communities. So I'm here, like most of you, to listen. I don't have much to offer except my desire to support you in whatever you as a community, as a group, decide to do. And that's why I'm here tonight, just to let you know that your local government is here for you. We are fighting for as much money. I know Sonoma County is too, sometimes from the same pots, for whatever we can get to bring back to our counties from the state or the feds. And having these kinds of projects that are really well planned, well designed, that have all these components that you, some of which you've already heard about, that is essential for us to bring home the bacon, so to speak. And so again, thank you all for being here. It's I only have 7 more months in this job, but I am focused on this issue and will remain so probably after that. But anyway, thank you again for getting coming together.
Sonoma County Supervisor Susan Gorin, and many of you do know that Susan lost their family home also in the Thames fire, but they are also back in a brand new.
I'm in a brand new home. Waiting for that PG&E settlement to come through, because it's like all of you who have rebuilt, you know, whatever you plan for in a budget, you just blew through that budget immediately. So in fact, our contractor was still wandering around trying to finish up odds and ends. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Anis and Dee. I've known you for a very long time. And my good friend Diane Dillon, she's the one with the really peaceful smile. She has 7 more months to go. And you all know, I'm not running for re-election. I have about 2.5 years to go. My smile is not quite so peaceful. I have some more battles ahead. But this area and the beautiful regional park that I look at every day has been overrun with fires from different directions twice. But I have to say, and this is the second time that I've been up here in about a month looking at the pace of recovery, and it is gratifying to see. It's interesting, as I was driving up yes, I knew they were undergrounding the utility lines. I knew to come up Calistoga Road. It was so interesting to see the burned trees on the left and know that was the Tubbs fire, Nuns fire sometimes. The trees on the right, the glass fire. And see, I've been noticing the difference in recovery. I drove up France Valley's Road, beautiful, strong oaks, recovering, resilient, new houses, pretty upper scale houses. I'm yet driving up St. Helena Road. Oh man, a lot of dead and blacked trees. Not a lot of rebuilding going on yet, but I know you're working really hard, and congratulations for making the decision, Ray and everybody else, to rebuild. You see the value of the land. You see how it holds you back. The landscape is recovering, but it will take a while. And it is difficult to make that decision, to have the faith to rebuild in an area that was so significantly burned during the last 2 fires. And all of us recognize how fast those fires happened. I was at the time when the Tubbs and the Sonoma complex fires came around, and I was watching on the news media in tears, knowing how devastated the district was, not realizing I was going to lose my home in 2 days. And that fire continued burning for about a week and a half, destroying the homes, not allowing us to go back in. The glass fire, I got a call from the CAO about 8 o'clock on Sunday night. You are not on the text thread. That fire is coming. Get out now. And I went, oh God, here we go again. And it took me about an hour and a half to get out of Oakmont. So we continue to learn those painful lessons about the importance of early alert systems, as well as evacuation, looking at routes that we need to create. I'm going to tickle my throat. I'm going through my little iced tea here. And along with Roberta from Fire Safe Sonoma, Carleone, I see you back there, Ben Nichols. We continue to support each other, to be the cheerleaders, to applaud Lynn, my great and long good friend, Michael, my new good friend, and all of you working together to develop the community wildfire protection plan. I first met Carol Leon up at Moments Grill, that beautiful community, developing the CWPP and saying, what is this? You know, it's great, we're coming together, and having such incredible sadness to know that that intentional community was devastated by the fires a few short years later. And I also know that we have funding for grants from a lot of different places. Thank you, CAL FIRE, for your grants. Appreciate that. PG&E settlement funds, we're now working on the second and the third round of grants. That funding is hopefully not sustainable. We're not going to have more settlements. But what can we do with the one-time funds that we do have? And how can we work with the fire safe councils to both encourage them to form, to prioritize projects, and yet know that you're not going to get funding for some of the projects that you prioritized? How do we look for more funding to support the efforts of the fire safe councils? And Lisa is here, Lynn is here. We had a survivors group for almost 2 years where we came together supporting each other. Sadly, the last fire was virtual, not the same, not a lot of hugging experience during COVID. Continue doing the work that you're doing. Continue to cheerlead and present really imaginative, important projects. We, at the decision maker level, will continue to advocate for all of that, all the while knowing we're not going to have funding for everybody. But be persistent and we will get there together. Lynn was talking, and I just want to say, Lynn was talking about, Michael was talking about, how do we know how we work together? What we're proposing is the best science. That's the challenge that we have right now. And I see my friend Fred Ufrat, Forrester. We have this controversy going on in Sonoma County. Wait, you can't cut down that tree. Wait, it has value, even though it's totally blackened. At what scale do we contemplate thinning, cutting down trees? How can we cut through that chatter, even among well-intentioned communities, to get to the science and to propose what we really need to do, which is fuel reduction on a massive scale. We love that we are recovering, but we have a lot of work to do. Thank you for being kind.
Thank you both, supervisors, for taking the time. I know you're passionate for your communities and you know you're going to be there to help us. Our next guests are from Vibrant Planet. I think we just today have Joe Flannery. And Vibrant Planet has created tools that go way beyond ones that we carry in our tool pouches or on our fire trucks. The tool they'll introduce is Land Tender, which speeds and informs land management decisions and supports collaboration like this in an era of rapidly changing conditions. Your fire safe councils may want to use Land Tender in your geography here, and Joe's going to teach us about what it can do for us.
Well, thank you. Get plugged in here, make sure this, I'm going to be off center a little bit here. Hopefully it might just block just your view, Dee. I'm a little tall, so I can't stand center here. One more second. So I'm Joe Flannery. I work for an organization called Vibrant Planet. You'll see what that is in a moment here. Before working for Vibrant Planet, for the last decade, actually decade plus in the public sector. So most recently, I spent the last 10 years working for the U.S. Forest Service. And I will say seeing a crowd this size is kind of bittersweet to me. So I've spent a lot of time at public meetings. I'm also going to grab a drink here. And it wasn't that long ago that groups of this size were showing up to stop projects. And I had a lot of that in my career. And so it's pretty cool to see a lot of, a group coming together here to start something. I also say it's bittersweet because I know a lot of you are here because you lost something, or there's anxiety that you may lose something you care about, whether it's your home, whether it's even aesthetic landscape that's nearby, outside of the community. So a little bittersweet, but for those of us like myself who've been alone in these spaces for a long time, seemingly yelling down empty hallways that we need to act and act sooner, it's a little nice to see a large group this motivated. And I'll echo the comments that that really working together is the best way forward. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about Land Tender. That is our program. It's a software program, but really I'm going to back off a little bit. I'm going to speak kind of broadly about when we go to scale. And I'm going to use the phrase pace and scale a lot, pace and scale. And what I mean by that, that's a cliche term almost at this point that was used heavily in the Forest Service and other agencies. Pace and scale meaning we need to do more field treatments, and we need to do them more quickly and more broadly across the state. And of course, I'm talking about landscape level project work, looking at landscape level, the pace and scale. And so here's me. I spent my last position in the Forest Service. I was the lead wildfire communicator for the entire state for the Forest Service. I made all these educational outreach videos, and I was one of many people, not just in the Forest Service, but all around the state, this last 10 years or so. And we've all been saying the same thing, right? And that's essentially what we've been saying is we know field treatments and or prescribed fire reduces the risk of high intensity wildfire, right? We introduced low intensity wildfire that California has a lot of fire adapted ecosystems too. We know those reduce the risk of high intensity fire. We just need more capacity to increase the pace and scale. And I said this pretty much all of my stakeholder engagements, all my outreaches, they pretty much said the same thing. And what does capacity mean? Capacity means more funding, and it means more public involvement. And so what has happened in that time, right? So it was this 10, 15-year period when those of us were screaming for the need to increase in pace and scale. And it might not feel that way to everyone, but I do think we're actually in a transition moment right now. And I think there's a few indicators that we've seen recently. This is Vice President Harris in California about 5 months ago, committing $600 million, not just for fire recovery, but for forest resilience projects in California. To me, that's a sign that we're moving beyond, moving from a space of needing to increase pace and scale. We are increasing the pace and scale. You all in this room right now are taking the first steps of increasing the pace and scale of landscape resilience to your communities. You are doing it, right? Funding is coming, there's more funding coming. We're gonna fight over it, we are, but there is more funding. 10 years ago, there wasn't. Another sign I see, this is a picture I took a couple years ago when I was still working for the Forest Service. Of all these folks here at this big fuel reduction project, these are all the people that were responsible for it. And they're talking about, we're gonna learn about this data set. This is a picture from the North Yuba Forest. It's the North Yuba watershed, kind of northwest of Lake Tahoe. It's going to be our demo landscape. So they've already used this system we're going to talk about. Now look at this picture, and it's hard to tell. No one's perfectly in uniform, as we did in the Forest Service. But there's about 20 people in this picture, and only about 4 of them work for the U.S. Forest Service. So that is increasing the pace and scale of restoration. What does that mean? It means people, right? So we're starting to get more public involvement, and we're starting to get more funding. We're moving into a space of increasing that pace and scale. So what does that mean? What are the new tensions now that we're entering this new realm of increasing the pace and scale? So the way I like to frame it, and this is my little stump speech here. Really what it is that over this past 30, 40, 50 years, especially in California, between our partners in Cal Fire and the U.S. Forest Service and all the local resources, we've built essentially the largest wildland firefighting organization the world has ever known. And as conditions have changed in our state, we see that's not good enough, right? We can't fight our way out of these fires. And that's no disrespect to wildland firefighters. Some of my best friends on the entire planet are wildland firefighters. Folks I go way back with roommates and all my days in the Forest Service and everything else. But what that means is there was a social contract that we as society entered with the wildland firefighting community. They said we need more equipment and apparatus. We delivered that, and lo and behold, they can't keep up with the pace and scale of change, of disturbance in our state. So those of us that are trying to increase the pace and scale of resilience, we're gonna fall into that same social contract, right? So that means it's gonna be a lot of, it's really a new social contract that's gonna come with these new tensions. And I'm gonna go through them real quick, and then we're actually going to play the software for a moment. And then what I really want to do is stop talking with the presentation, close the Mac, and we can actually have some questions and answers. So the four kind of tensions that I see as we move into this new space, and really the way that we should design our systems around, design our processes by which we address pace and scale. We have to address these four things moving forward, as I see them at least. That's temporal pressure, transparency, public involvement, and data overload. And I'm going to go into each one. So first, temporal pressure. Dr. Malcolm North of the Forest Service basically said the current rate of disturbance versus treatment in California will be about 10 years before we lose all of our forests. Now, there might be some forests that stay around Lake Tahoe, right? Gets a lot of funding specifically there. But as we're seeing, a lot of black is starting to move its way across the landscape in the Sierra Nevada and in the upper North Coast Range as well. And so he said that not recently, he said that about 3 years ago, right? That was my call to action. As soon as I heard that, I said, I'm staying in this space no matter what the rest of my life. It's going to be my last work. And so that was 2 years ago. So maybe 7 years remaining, right? And so what that means is the first tension in this new social contract. As more people and more funding comes, they're all going to ask us to plan wildfire resilience treatments much faster. I felt this in the Forest Service. We're going to be asked to work faster. We're going to be asked to adapt to change much faster. That means when we're halfway through a planning process and we get an unplanned disturbance in that landscape, how fast can we pivot and reprioritize where we're going to spend our funding and where the priority work is going to go? So, what are some solutions? Are there tools out there, or systems, or processes, or things in this group that we can talk about to make it easier on ourselves? Can we adapt to that need for temporal pressure a little more quickly? Another one is transparency. This goes back to kind of that social contract, right? Again, our funding's coming. Very cool. Good news. Love it. We begged for funding for years and years and years. But how do we determine the highest priority areas to spend that funding? That's going to be a challenge for us. And really what I mean is moving the conversation from acres treated to priority acres treated. California right now, the task force, and they're well aware of this, they talk about it, the governor's task force had meetings. There's a single metric of success, it's acres treated. Last year in 2021, we treated X acres. Are those the priority acres? Was that the best place for us to spend our money? I don't know the answer to this question, but we need to focus on that. And also transparency, meaning not just how we spend the money, but where do we go? This group, you were going to have tough decisions. I want you to cover. There's going to be decisions when you go to present said project or series of projects. People look at the map and they will see that their home does not lie next to some of the priorities that this group has established. That is a tough thing to tell people, that they're going to be in year 5. And the model hazard said it's going to be high intensive wildfire within 10 years. You're rolling the dice there. How do we, in a transparent way, based on science, walk people through our decision-making processes? Because there's going to be trade-offs and there are going to be difficult decisions to make. Public involvement, going back to this picture again, all those people, right? Now, when I look at that picture, I know a lot of those people in that group. I worked with them for years. Not all of those folks are trained in fire ecology. They're not foresters. A lot of them are thrust into this space because they're passionate about protecting the natural resources and passionate about protecting their communities. So what that means is there's a lot of people who are willing to help out. How can we best utilize them? Are our current planning systems accessible to them? Right now, most planning systems, even when you're in a big collaborative group, you're still going to be reliant on a consultant group or a government agency and a few individuals within those agencies or groups to come up with specific plans. They'll get you in a round table and they'll talk about it. They'll talk with you about it, but it's still that the tough decisions are still going to be made in those priorities in a siloed system. So how can we break down those vertical silos? How can we make a more horizontal integration of prioritization in our landscapes? So really, I would argue that a lot of our current planning systems are done in a silo, even if done in a collaborative setting. And again, are there systems, are there tools? What can you guys do now that you know this moving forward to make sure we break down those vertical silos into a horizontal integration of ideas and collaboration? And the last is data overload. Man, I see more and more maps like this everywhere I go, right? Everyone has a new red map. They hand you a red map and they say, go treat here. So there's almost data overload right now. It's awesome. It's great news, right? Again, 10, 15 years ago, we didn't know what was out there. You know, remote sensing was a dream of some people that we can actually plan resilience projects by not walking every square inch of hundreds of thousands of acres. And so there's a lot of data out there, but as my supervisor, our chief resilience officer, who kind of pioneered a lot of this, always says, we're a data-rich country, but we are a data analysis poor country, meaning we're not using our data to inform our analysis very well. We got a lot of data, but we're still pressing easy buttons. It's a natural reaction. When you have a disaster, it's a proven fact. When there's a disaster, people don't turn to systematic solutions. They turn to the easiest, most readily available solution. So again, how can we harness all this data and actually utilize it to make a decision? You know, I'm gonna show our software in a moment here. It does a lot of this. If you guys don't use it, cool. Whatever you do, make sure you're using the data for analysis. Don't be overwhelmed by it. It's very helpful in the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Landowner. That is our software program. And again, it's a software program, but it's more of a system. And I say this every time, I'm a Californian first. If I'm not working for Vibrant Planet, hopefully my boss is listening to this, I'm going to be working for whatever organization or agency is going to be in the front end of creating change and increasing the pace and scale of resilience in California. I left the Forest Service, I left the public sector, and I'm a third generation public land manager. My grandfather was a state park ranger here in California, both my parents were park rangers in California. It's a family business, and I chose to leave the public sector because I do see a systematic need for change. And I do think Landowner provides some of that. For me, when I look at those tensions, our program and our system, it does check off all those boxes for me. Who is Vibrant Planet though, right? I just talked about this group. Who are we? Real quick, we are a public benefit corporation. So for me, that was a big deal, right? I wasn't going to leave for a true for-profit organization. We actually started as a 501c3 nonprofit. And as you'll see in the software, the amount of funding we had to raise to steal software engineers from Silicon Valley to build a tool that not just scientists could use, but all of us in this room could use to prioritize treatments. To build that tool, we couldn't raise the money as a nonprofit. So we morphed into a public benefit corporation, which gives me legal protection to focus the mission lock structure on creating more resilience and not profits. And I can't get fired for making decisions that actually enhance resilience over profits for future shareholders. That's what a public benefit corporation is. There's legal laws that kind of protect myself. I wouldn't have joined if not. And again, so we kind of this hybrid structure, a few kind of small items. We still have the nonprofit. It's where our data, after we curated data for a landscape, that data all sits in a repository. The scientific community researchers can then use that data for cool stuff. And Vibrant Planet that you'll see, we host the actual platform and the actual application itself. The cool thing is it's a science-based organization. So those of us in the Forest Service who kind of believe in remote sensing, again, remote sensing, leveraging technology, geospatial data sets to create landscape level plans, there's all this great science that backs it up. And we have some kind of cruddy tools, clunky tools in the government, at least in the federal government. Cal Fire's has some metro tools these days. But they're still used solely by government folks. And our dream was, how do we take all the science, how do we automate it for the average person? So our organization is a science-based organization. Everything you see today in Landowner is going to be based on these well-established frameworks, stuff like GTR 315, how we assess wildfire risk or values. The last thing is, who are these people behind Vibrant Planet? This is our Chief Resilience Officer, Scott Conway. This company and this kind of system was kind of one of his visions. We have Hugh Safford, our Chief Scientist. We have a whole team of PhDs, ecologists, a lot of folks like myself. They can come from the public sector or academia. And we've kind of created the science, created methodologies. And then we have these Silicon Valley folks who kind of come in on this tech team and they've automated it all. And I'm not going to lie, at our meetings, half the group doesn't know what the other half is talking about. I never know what the Silicon Valley folks, they don't really know what the ecology folks are talking about, but it works and it's pretty cool. A few more folks, our executive team. But yeah, so this is Landowner, it's a software program, covered that pretty heavily here. The last thing I'm going to say, so we're going to get into the software in a moment here, and I'm going to walk you through a couple kind of a bit of a case study, if you will, on the North Yuba Forest Partnership. So the North Yuba landscape, 275,000 acres in the North Fork of the Yuba River. A group of 11 folks came together, 11 organizations, including the Forest Service, State of California, a bunch of other groups, Nature Conservancy, And they created a pretty cool collaborative framework. And we were a subcontractor on that group. We were consultants. Scott Connolly was a consultant on that group. And once he saw how slick that framework was used in a collaborative setting, he wanted to duplicate it and automate it. And that's what land tenure is, and we're going to show you. So when I show you the demo, we're going to be looking at data from the North Yuba landscape. Now that's going to be a different ecotype than this ecotype around here, right? It's going to be a mixed conifer subalpine forest. It's going to be a different land ownership pattern. I think in our demo, 80% of the land is owned and managed by the U.S. Forest Service. But the system itself is what I want to demonstrate for you. And that system we think can be applied to any landscape, anywhere across the state or across the nation. It can be scaled up at any level. So let's actually get into that. Real quick, I'm going to show you a framework. Let's see the internet's a bit slow. All right, we're gonna skip that. We're gonna go right into the software program. Okay, so this is our landscape. This is our planning area. A lot of folks that I talk to around the state, when a collaborative group forms, they actually always want to start on one project, right? They're gonna start in one area, kind of a pilot, if you will. So this is a hypothetical pilot. It's not very scientific. It's a rectangle. This is it's a rectangle around the town of Downeyville. And how our system works, and how I suggest all systems should work, is you don't start at the hazard or the risk. You start establishing the values as a group. And that's what the North Yuba Forest Partnership did. So we have a geospatial representation of their values, mostly resources and assets. And I can kind of turn them on here. So I can turn on the vegetation layer. We see, these are tall tree groves. I can turn on legend. These are meadows. These are things that the local group cares about. We can also turn on some of our assets, right? We can turn on maybe our structures. You see all those little dots where people live in the town of Downeyville. We can turn on our utility infrastructure. We can turn on, our recreation infrastructure where people go to spend money to keep the local economy afloat. And the point is that there can be a ton of different resources and assets. We actually have an acronym for it. We're all government folks. We create more acronyms when we leave the federal system. We call them SARAs up here, Strategic Areas, Resources, and Assets. This is an important step because when you assess hazard and you assess risk, risk is essentially hazard times your values. So anytime somebody hands you a map of red on it and they say, go treat here, they've already told you what your values are. So make sure when you come up with a system that you take your values that you care about and you put them into the system on the front end. And the cool thing about our system is all these values have been relatively appraised to one another. What that means is things that have an economic value like a home, they can be appraised and evaluated for priority for treatments alongside things that might not have an economic value, but do have societal value, like a grove of trees that's the cluster's carving, or a beautiful aesthetic landscape where we walk our dogs. That's the reason why we live in those communities. There's tough decisions to be made on how you prioritize resources. If you haven't relatively and unbiasedly appraised all resources and assets to one another, how can you make priority decisions on where to spend the small amount of money we do have, even though funding is coming? So there's a lot of these assets and resources, right? There could be like 50 to 100 different of them. What we actually do is we take all those resources, this, again, I say we, but the group did this first, and they package them up and they bundle them into the 10 resilience pillars. Some folks are already familiar with the 10 resilience pillars. This is how grants are going to be allocated from the state. So we, of course, brought that in, right? So we have 10 resilience pillars. And within these resilience pillars, picture these as titles on a bucket. And within those buckets lives all of those sorrows, all those things that we care about. They all live inside here. Perfect example would be, let's see. So I can turn on, let's see, today we're gonna put our county supervisor hat on, and we're gonna care about fire adapted communities and economic diversity.
Could you move it over just a little bit? We can't read it all.
Oh, I can't. I did not see that.
That's okay.
Let's see if we can.
Maybe not. Just read them out.
Lumber. Any ideas in the audience? We're going to collaborate.
Yeah.
Read it out loud.
Okay. Yeah, so what we're gonna do, see, where was I? So we were about to talk about,
Pillars.
pillars. So, the county supervisor, we're gonna put on our county supervisor hat. We're gonna show you in the system how people can work together to come up with a priority together, right? So what I'm doing right now is I'm toggling on a bucket labeled fire adapted communities. So fire, you know, that this is fire adapted communities. And what I've just done is I've turned on a value map essentially. And that value map, a lot of red, it's a small planning area around the town expected. These are the values. These are basically an expression of all of those SARs that we just learned about. The homes, utility lines, recreation infrastructure, roads, evacuation routes. The higher the red color, the darker I should say the red color. That means that there's more overlap of those SARs. And you'll see a little bit why we organize it that way. It's going to give us ease in planning our priorities later down in the system. So again, this is just a set of values. And right now, we're just establishing values and just showing you where they lie spatially in our planning area. This will load. I'll actually, because we're very, we can't be black boxing all of this system. It's the public system. So I'll show you exactly what's in those value systems. So this manual comes with our program here. We can click on where we were economics. We were looking at fire adapted communities. And again, this is like literally from the North Yuba Forest Partnership Project. This group decided on this. So within those darker areas, the more utility infrastructure, recreation infrastructure, emergency service infrastructure, communication, blah, blah, blah. You can read it right there. Those are all packaged up inside of there. And of course, other ones that you can't see, but if I turn on one that says wetland integrity, not much, right? Just one kind of wetland in that area. And we can see the different colors are indicated there. So now we have our values. Everything we care about is out there in the landscape, we can see it. Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind reading the list of the pillars?
Yeah, sure. So, and again, it's kind of jargony, right? But it's biodiversity conservation, wetland integrity, carbon sequestration, water security, air quality, fire adapted community, economic diversity, and social and cultural well-being. This is a system of resilience planning that was developed by the Nature Conservancy and the state of California and a little bit of the Forest Service together. So the takeaway is that there's not a value that we don't place in a landscape that we live in that doesn't lie somewhere in one of these buckets. In fact, someone like myself who likes to live and play and drink fresh water and breathe clean air, I have a lot of values in one buckets. So the next thing I'll show you, so those are our values. Next thing we'll show you is our hazards. We've modeled hazards. And the big takeaway is that our system, we don't create data and nor do we create models. It's a vessel, if you will, that takes in the best available data and the best available models and allows you to make priority decisions. Really, we're kind of getting at that data overload. How can we organize ourselves? So in this landscape, the collaborative group chose to model fire. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Darker red, higher the fire hazard. And of course, they chose to model, not of course, but they chose to model drought as a hazard, which was pretty cool. We figured out a way to model drought and actually have a drought hazard model. So now we have our values, and now we have our hazard. Now I'm going to get to risk, right? Risk is next. We have value, we have hazard, now we can turn risk. So I'd like to go back in here. If you see, you maybe can see I've turned on risk. Before we had value toggled, and that's why I showed you all of the value of fire adapted communities. Now we're going to click risk. I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to re-click on fire adapted communities. Holy cow, a lot of pink jumps off the map. Same thing, pink is higher the risk. What we've just done behind the scenes is we've taken all of our values of fire adapted communities, we've exposed them to our modeled hazards, and now we display our risk. So even this 5 years ago in the Forest Service would blow my mind just to have an instant risk map. And this is where our system and any system that you develop should use that first, kind of base level of hazard and value and risk to then prioritize where your treatments go. This is how we do it in our system. We first go back to our planning system, and this is really where we've done everything in the system behind the scenes, using the best available science and unbiasedly organizing the data and appraising the values to one another to empower you, the user, to prioritize where the treatments on the landscape should go. And how do I do that? I do that by simply grabbing one of these things. You can't see this one. These are all the same buckets. These are the 10 resilience pillars. but now I can weight them. So I'm gonna go down, let's say I'm someone who cares just about fire adapted communities and maybe economic diversity. And you can see it's a 1 to 5 scale. I simply grab these toggles and I bring them over, super easy on the user. This is literally why we're not a nonprofit. To do this, it took software engineers from Silicon Valley to incorporate all the science that empowers you to toggle those switches, like a year of work. And so we've just told land tender that we want to treat the landscape within this rectangle, within our initial planning area, and we want to treat the landscape to maximize the effect to fire adapted community and economic diversity. Now, what we call that in land tender, you're going to see in a second, is called a restorative return on investment. It's actually a combination of 2 things. It's not just the avoided loss from our model hazard, it's also the ecological benefit of the actual treatment itself. So it goes back to some things we were hearing about earlier about, do we cut the trees? Are they good for the trees? Are they good for water? How do we make all these complex web of decisions? Our system tracks both, not just avoided loss, but also the ecological benefit of treatment. So what happens is you click this generate scenario button. I'm not doing it live here just because the internet's a little slow, so I kind of preload all this. And you get a map that jumps out. It's got a lot of yellow on it, ton of yellow. The yellow has the highest impact. Land tender right now in our planning area has just told us that all the areas in yellow have a higher impact, a higher place that we should go spend $1 we have of our funding should be spent in an area of yellow as compared to purple area or the orange area or something like that. Still a lot of yellow, right? And again, so that yellow area would be the areas that we should spend our dollar to maximize our restorative return on investment. And that restorative return on investment, again, in this specific scenario, is for what? It's for fire adapted communities and economic diversity only. So it's kind of neat. I mean, a lot of yellow, kind of helpful. This is a lot of area to treat, a lot of money. We can then further constrain it. As we talked about earlier, we know that there's going to be limited funding and we're all going to be fighting over it. So let's say we have a group, a collaborative group, that this person, this organization that came up with this scenario as part of, let's give them $1 million to spend over 3 years. So basically they can spend a third of $1 million on projects for 3 years. I then click this button, optimize scenario, and it takes 4 minutes. After 4 minutes, this is what pops out. These are the highest restored return on investment projects. So this just took $1 million and it found 3 projects. And actually, we actually seeded treatment types in our planning area to maximize our restorative return on investment solely for fire adapted communities and economic diversity. And I can actually click on this. And what's neat about this is like really why I love the Forest Service. I know this area, I know Downhill. When you drive through this area, this orange spot right here around Downhill has been ignored. This area hasn't seen disturbance in like 110 years, right? So we haven't had a wildfire, nor have we had a planned disturbance. It's been a form of treatment. This area is going to burn. I rarely go into this space on that single highway in August if the wind is blowing. I really don't. And so, but this area has also been ignored because as you pull some information about it, we can click. We can see that, well, there we go. I'm pulling information specifically about that orange. My timer not here. All right, I'll do that in 1 second. And so, we see some information about it. We see that there's a gross cost, a net cost. We see the actual treatments. We see the ownership. And by my Forest Service standards, this is an expensive place to treat, right? So it's the net cost is 670 acres. Down here, the bargain in that watershed is very expensive. That's why it's been ignored. My point here is that that's the priority acres. It should no longer be ignored. Even though a third of $1 million only got us 600, we've got us 500 acres, it's still the priority acres. It might not make the best talking point, it's not a lot of acres, but it's the priority acres. We're changing the conversation if we need to in this space. Last thing, and then I'll promise I'll be on time. The cool thing is that, so just as this group, this organization was weighing their priorities on fire adapted communities and economic diversity, another group was doing the same thing, same plan areas, same money, but this one was weighing with biodiversity and wetland integrity, different projects, different locations, right? Well, of course, different priorities. And maybe a third group was talking about carbon and water security. It looks different still. And the cool thing is, and I'll stop here, you can pull them all up side by side, you can compare them. So when we're dealt with difficult decisions that I've been in those rooms behind closed doors, whose priority wins the day. We actually have talking points now. We see all the co-benefits of all the different treatment types. And the last thing I'll show you, and I'm totally rushing through these last really cool 2 slides. The last thing we have is we have an actual complete consensus map, right? So if we all can't get along those 3 different groups, maybe we use this functionality in our system. This dark blue area indicates an area of complete consensus, meaning if you care about fire adapted communities or wetlands or carbon or water, we all agree that these areas of wood should be treated. Maybe this becomes our preferred alternative in a NEPA or a CEQA process. And so I will stop there, happy to answer any questions. This slide, I really ran through. This is actually the payoff slide, but I'm running out of time. We're more than happy to answer any questions about this as well.
Where do you get your data? Is it open source?
Yeah, totally. So the data comes from, the first thing you do, it's a great question, is, let me show you if I can. Generally, the higher quality data, the better, right? So internally, we actually assess the departure of the vegetation type from the current data provided LiDAR. If there's no LiDAR, we can create synthetic LiDAR, and we actually compare the historic range of variability to the contemporary reference conditions, right? So when California was a standalone fire adapted community, fire adapted ecosystem, vegetation had a similar, had a kind of structure type. Ours has been altered because we oversuppressed for wildfire for so long. We look at the difference between the two, and we calculate if a treatment will bring a unit closer to the historic range of variability. And so what we're looking at here, that's why you actually zoom in on these. You see them as individual units. The little lines here you can see. So that kind of comes packaged, and that's our assessment of how these units respond to fire hazard. Then each of these units also has baked into it the other data sources, which are those SARs. And a lot of those are locally sourced, right? A lot of those, it's the local sensitive habitat, it's a local evacuation route that the county plans already established. We bring those in, those are also baked into these units. And so thus, when you get land tender, when you pull the levers, you're emphasizing which units to treat to protect all the values based on the ecotype and its exposure to the model hazards.
How often is it updated?
We can update it once a year. And so that's what's cool, right? So instead of a static plan that takes 5 years to do the NEPA and sequel on, and you finally sign it and you have an unplanned disturbance, you throw it in the trash can. This is actually a dynamic living cloud-based plan. So as soon as you have one planned disturbance, we can rerun the model, and then you can kind of just pivot, create new priorities and move on. So yeah, the data is basically comes from, we work with the local group to get data, but generally it's LiDAR. We can recreate LiDAR if not, and then it's locally sourced data.
Did you just say you can recreate LiDAR?
It's a very complicated process, but yes, we call it synthetic LiDAR. It's basically, it's a canopy height model where we can determine the height of the structure of vegetation based on machine learning, based on satellite imagery. So that's another half-hour presentation, but essentially. And so we usually, when there's been a disturbance after a LiDAR fire, we can use that to kind of patch the gaps.
What about treatment instead of disturbance by fire? Do you track that or account for that?
Totally, that's actually what those updates are for, right? So we actually reassess the landscape after the first round of treatments. And maybe the priorities don't change. Maybe we stay in the same units and we do another entry. But exactly, we expose our units to both unplanned and planned disturbances.
And why don't you always start with it toggled fully up for every one of the 11 or 10 pillars?
What do I do what now?
You can toggle your values, but wouldn't the starting point be to have them all maximized?
No, the starting point is actually having them all not maximized. You can just go that way. That's why they're all kind of even. If you were to maximize them all, I mean, you could, yeah. Great question. Why wouldn't you start with them all maximized and it takes them away? That'd be a great discussion point for your collaborative. It's up to you guys how to toggle the levers. If you could, absolutely.
So did you already, this is just this, like you haven't done Sonoma County?
You've just done this
No, we're looking
one.
at, let me see if I can back off here. And then, Dee, I'm sorry, I'll let you call people. I'm gonna do a poor job of it. This is the North Yuba landscapes. This is like, you know, the Sierra Valley north of Truckee. Yeah, so again, different ecotype, different group, but I think that group, and I was kind of part of that group, kind of on perimeter, what they did, and they're rewarded for it, right? They just got $80 million for 300,000 acres for the next like 10 years. So what they did, there's a little bit of magic there, and that's why we kind of operationalized it with our software, if you will.
And was that was a collaborative, like county-wide effort that
Yeah.
organized that? Like, it wasn't just fire councils, it must have been like.
No, but there's the equivalent of a fire council is one of 11 collaborative members. So
But was it like spearheaded by the county? I mean, who's?
No, I mean, it was kind of organic. It was two things, I would argue, and other folks who are actually a little deeper in that project could probably better answer this question, but there was, the Nature Conservancy had some really cool data sets. And they were like, hey, if anyone's willing to take the plunge on using data to make decisions, we have some great data for this area. The Forest Service, and I was on this forest at the time, it started at Tahoe National Forest. That forest supervisor was willing to share decision space with the group, right? So a true collaboration, you have to share decision space. It's gonna be slower. The collaborative decision making is the slowest possible way to make decisions, but it creates the best possible outcome. There's a graph in there somewhere, right? And so versus an autocratic decision making process, they have to be quick, but maybe not the best decisions.
Right.
And so the forest supervisor was willing to share decision space. They created an MOU with the 11 different groups. There was a water district that benefits from healthy forests. There's the Nature Conservancy, the state of California, a bunch of foundations, community groups, very well represented. The local tribe was one of the 11 signings.
So how big is that space in comparison to the Sonoma County, for instance? Like, are you taking Santa Rosa, Windsor, half of the county? I mean, how does that compare?
Are you referring to the space of this little rectangle? Or
Yeah.
the entire, this little rectangle?
Yeah,
I can figure it out. This is only probably like 20,000 acres. This is small.
so is that, how does that compare to our county?
I actually don't know the size of either of the tri, all three of the tri-county areas off the top of my head, but I'll say that the land tender is designed and built to scale immediately. So what we do on 20,000 acres is the exact same in the way the software is built. You could do this for the whole state of California if you had a data. It doesn't, you can scale easily, it's the whole point.
But they could just also work within the two fire safety councils, or if there's unions organized in our geographic area that comprises the Diamond Mountain, Northwest Creek, and other, we can spread it broader than that.
And I also do want to acknowledge the fact that you saw those polygons, right, the different shapes. Those are based on a similar vegetation type, most likely on a similar aspect, and thus it would respond as a unit to a disturbance. Now, I realize that on some of the more higher density populated counties, those polygons are going to spread over multiple private parcel owners, correct? And so there will be a decision at a certain point. There will be a decision at some point where you're going to have, if you use a system like land tender or design your own system, there will be a decision point at some place where one of these polygons will overlap multiple private property owners. And then we're in the situation of, this is a priority. If we can treat this area, we protect a lot more, but it's spread over 3 different parcels. How are we going to get the private parcel owners to comply with the plan? And that's more of a policy decision than a science-based decision.
Logan, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So a lot of that's based on federal data, but we don't really have any federally managed lands in Sonoma County. Would you be missing a lot of the data sets if you try to do it?
No,
here?
so this isn't based on any federal data other than those individual locally sourced SARAs. When I flashed up the, I can do it again real quick. Like, you know, some of these like aspen stands and stuff, yeah, that's gonna be your federal data. That came from the Forest Service. But my guess is that there would be an equivalent set of pretty much bio-based data sets. And in fact, I looked at the program you guys have in place, And all those data sets that you guys have worked so hard on, right? For the wildfire field mapper,
Yes.
like I looked at this before I came over here, and that data, those are basically sawdust. A lot of this would be immediately pulled in. So in fact, I would argue this group, if this group wanted to use remote sensing as a way to make broad decisions, you're probably ahead of most other counties and groups because of that investment in that data.
Carly-Ann, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I got a question for you. I know that the Snow County Water Agency is working with the Conservation Biology Institute to do actually an almost identical product, and I'm wondering if you're aware of that. And
No.
that is in the works.
Cool. And like I said before in the beginning, like, I'm a Californian first, and so if you guys have an existing system that can do scalable, massive, chunky landscape plans while being transparent and allowing folks like yourself to set your own priorities, use it, please, use it. Like, it doesn't have to be ours. Use whatever works.
Sir, do you have something in that?
No.
No. Okay, go ahead.
How long did that take? And how long would it take us to do something this complicated?
For us to do that, for us to actually, start gathering the data, to do all that back end work, that probably takes about 3 to 4 months. So the time that we gather the data, the time we provide land tender, it takes about 4 months. So at the end of 4 months, you're able to do this. And remember, as we talk about planning, some of you may have heard this term before. There's what's called left side analysis and right side analysis. So left side analysis is when you get in a group and you decide what we're going to do, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why, when. And then the right side of the analysis is when you perform effects analysis for when and where and how and why are you going to do the things you do. So this is a great solution that solves the left side of your planning. You still have to do effects analysis, I'm guessing, some level of SQL probably, especially on any public property, to analyze environmental effects of these actions. So this is a solution to half of what's called planning. Most people think of planning as CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, as this burdensome process by which we have to analyze the effects. At better those projects, the effects analysis doesn't take that long. It's deciding where you want to go, how you want to go, why, when. That's what takes a long time in a climate.
I also just want to suggest that if you have questions for any of the other presenters, this is also a good time to do that. Even though, Joe, you can stay up there, but I'm just suggesting that questions can be opened to beyond the land tender if you have. So who wants to go next? Michael?
Yeah, I was wondering if, for, theoretically, if we were to take something like this on, take a land tender for our these watersheds that we're talking about locally here, is there any ballpark estimate of the cost of this process to get this up and running?
Great question. I wouldn't, I'm not dodging the question. I think we can ask that every first meeting, every time. And I have to answer the same way, and that is, it's based upon complexity and available data. So there is some data limitations, right? If we have to kind of rebuild a lot of data, there's going to be a higher cost. And so if we were to start talking, the first thing we're going to ask is about LiDAR coverage. We're going to ask about how available is that, are the data sets that went into the wildfire field mapper, what condition are they in, how organized are they? And then we're going to look at this, how large a boundary we want to set, right? Is it going to be 3 counties? Is it going to be a smaller district? I will say for the Tahoe National Forest, the entire Tahoe National Forest, which I say has very high quality data, it is medium complexity. Our estimated cost to give them land tender was, I think, $520,000. And so it's expensive. I will also say that we've done some cost analysis, and to hire a consultant to do all of that is actually probably going to be a bit more.
What about the data that we have on the open space?
A million acres?
Over 1.2 million. Sorry?
Go ahead. No, that's fine. What we just mentioned. But you didn't have- So we have 1 million acres in Sonoma County.
1 million acres.
And do we have the open space district data must be able to do?
Probably,
Put
yeah.
in play here because they have tree types and maybe some of
So
those. more
that's a starting
specific.
place based on complexity and data. So, yeah, the size, pretty much size, pretty much sounds like.
Fred.
What a fabulous system, it's amazing. It also gives a prescription for all the areas that you're
It does,
planning out.
yeah.
And, are you comfortable with those prescriptions in various kinds of different ecosystems? And with the advent of prescribed burns and stuff like that, might prescribed burns be recommended outcome?
Prescribed burns absolutely recommended outcomes, especially two kinds. There could be an aerial recommendation, which doesn't really happen too much in California, but also is going to be a ground-based recommendation. What it does do, here's what's one thing that we haven't quite figured out yet, I'll be honest, is that a lot of times prescribed fire is a great secondary treatment. We want to initially treat the landscape to get to a place where we can routinely use prescribed fire as well as maintenance, right? Just like the ecosystems we're adapted to here in California.
Right.
And so the treatments you're seeing are the primary treatments. So even though you might get a thinning or we did Stanford University, we did their lands small scale, it's kind of a pilot, and we had like goat recommendations, right? And so again, they didn't want prescribed fire. And so you won't see prescribed fire come up as primary too often. You will in this landscape because there's some areas that's already been treated, but give or take, how much disturbance already occurred in the landscape, it might not be ready for prescribed fire. So this is going to give you your primary. And we're actually, and this is confusing further still, this is the old version we're demonstrating. The new version is coming out, and the new version, you can actually turn off certain prescriptions, certain treatments, right? If you're saying, hey, we're never going to do this in Sonoma County, by statute, we can't have tracked equipment over 20% slope. It's against our laws. You can turn that off, and Landowner will pick the second best treatment for that landscape. I'm a hand talker, I'm sorry.
Yes. So when you're making these prescriptions based on your data set, is there also an evaluation after that occurs when you have a lot of projects where you're able to say, okay, yes, this is effective?
Totally, yeah. We're validating the data right now for the Dillon National Forest. So right now we have a small team that works with the local folks. Because again, these are likely treatments, these are recommendations. Land tenure is a decision support tool. It's there for transparency, it's there for you to lean on, but you're still going to want to go out in the field and verify it. You still got to do your effects analysis. So what we've done on the Tahoe is we've asked our foresters, like, okay, why don't you go out, verify? Would you actually do a hand thinning here, or just more right for mechanical treatment? What we're finding so far in that process is land tenure is selecting a lot of areas correctly, but the boundaries might get adjusted a little bit when you go to a contract.
We have two more questions, and then I think we need to let you ask him questions at the reception. So, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just curious, how many geographical areas have you already done set for?
Great question. So we're really new, right? So this first version, if you will, launched in the fall. So it's only been about 6 months. So right now, the entire Lake Tahoe Basin, along with Stanford, was like a test pilot. The entire Lake Tahoe Basin is now using land tender. And then the Tahoe National Forest, I just referenced, is next. We're in the process of curating the data right now. And then after that, it's going to be Trinity County. So right now we're looking at some, all about million-acre landscapes. Some of the basins like 280,000.
Yes.
I'm kind of in the weeds here, but you may have already said this, are you working with CAL FIRE as like a partner in terms of?
We haven't directly had CAL FIRE yet be a primary, primary group or something. Usually there's a big collaborative.
So it's like the Trinity County reached out to you.
Exactly. It actually was called the Watershed Research and Training Center. I don't get familiar with their work.
I think Allison did a demonstration though to CAL FIRE in Sacramento.
Okay. But generally, CAL FIRE is generally part of these big collaboratives.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, yes, okay. Apparently there's a question for Susan Moore from the Peanut
from YouTube. So they would like to know, does the county have any other plans to produce another LiDAR set for Sonoma County? The current data set is from 2013 and misses the recent fires.
Thank you for the question. The Ag and Open Space District was responsible for the LiDAR survey a number of years ago. Karen Gaffney, who left us. And, you know, interestingly, my son-in-law, Thomas Taylor, working with Colorado State University, is working on the next project or the next experiment to be launched into space to orbit to do exactly that, vegetation management. And so I think not only CSU, but many organizations are really working and thinking about the application of LiDAR for this application and so many others. And Joe, do you have any idea about LiDAR and who's working on LiDAR?
I hear rumors that the CRNA for the whole state is gonna fly LiDAR statewide, but it's also been talked about for a little while now. And so if the Natural Resource Agency for the state does fly that, it's a priority for the governor's task force, but yet to be seen of results or data on the ground, even when a flight occurs.
I'm not sure
Takes a
that
while.
people can hear you. Do you need to
Yeah,
stand up, turn
this-
around?
Yeah, the state of California, the Natural Resource Agency has been talking about flying the entire state for a little while. And the governor's task force, wildfire task force, and forest resilience, they've also spoken about that. Even if a flight occurs tomorrow, there's a long period of time when they kind of curate that data. So I'm not exactly sure, but that's been talked about. And what that does, it kind of creates tension, right? Folks like yourself, do we wait for the state? Do we do it ourselves? And so we're all kind of waiting for that right now.
And Fred, do you have any other information on LiDAR? Yes, that would be you.
One of the deceptive things about LiDAR, we were just talking about it back here, I apologize, is that,
Which is why I called on you.
Yeah.
is that fires kill trees, but they don't burn them up. So if you flew LiDAR the day after a fire, it would look almost identical to what happened, or 2 years or 3 years. If people got, when there's a timber harvest, all the trees disappear. When there's management of the standing dead, then the LiDAR image is different. But otherwise, it has to decompose for 2 to 5, 10, 20 years before it starts looking like the forest is dead via LiDAR. However, you're combining it with the photo, the visible imagery, and then you can see what's, quote, dead already. There's a lot of images available, and Sonoma County's got the best veg LiDAR mapping of anywhere.
Even though it's a little dated, we are using the data for that to evaluate the potential for carbon sequestration, carbon sinks in intact landscapes. Yes, there are trees that haven't been burned yet, but we're also looking at older pathways for the Russian River meanders to think about where the course of the river has moved to and whether or not we could contemplate using adjacent land to divert. If we ever have stormwater again, we can divert it and allow it to sink into the aquifer. And I want to do the same thing for Sonoma Valley as well. So there are many applications, even with older data, that we're still finding useful.
Great. So we're gonna be closing up in a second, but not a second, but before we close, we're going to hear from Gretchen Hayes, the Executive Director of Napa County Firewise Foundation, and Rick McIntyre, Board President of Fire State Sonoma. But while they're coming up to speak to us, I want to thank the Jackson Family Wines and CalMart from Calistoga for donating the bulk of the refreshments tonight, and I don't think there was any other donations, but if there was, let me know. And I want to thank our volunteers that helped, or did most of the planning for this gathering and helping with the logistics. And anyone would like to join with the cleanup crew after the reception, you are going to be welcome. So with this, I would like to turn it over to you two.
Thank you. Well, my name is Gretchen Hayes, and I'm the inaugural Executive Director of the Napa Communities Firewise Foundation, or Napa Firewise, if you don't want such a mouthful. It's been exactly 1 year since I was hired. The NCFF, Napa Firewise, has been around since 2007, I think, is an all-volunteer organization. And with the advent of the 2017 and 2020 fires, Diane Dillon was actually quite pivotal in bringing people together who were concerned about taking action and control and doing something proactively instead of reactively for reducing wildfire risk in Napa County. I was asked tonight to speak about Measure L. And that's a key measure that we put on the ballot in cooperation with Napa County for a 1/4-cent sales tax. It was an initiative that did not pass yesterday because it needed 66% of the vote. It got close to 60, which in today's day and age is quite a lot since almost everything is a 49-51% split. But it doesn't mean that we've given up hope or that we won't be moving forward, because quite frankly, I think in the last year, well, actually just in the last 6 months of trying to put this on the ballot and move this forward as a funding source, we've really elevated our profile. And I could talk a little bit about how we got to this point, but I know that one of the biggest issues that we keep talking about is how do we collaborate? How do we connect? How do we get brand awareness? How do we get people involved? It is one of the biggest challenges we have. We do have a plan. When they came together, they put together a CWPP for all of Napa County. They did all the risk analysis. They brought it to the Board of Supervisors. It got passed, but hardly anybody knows about it. We did get money from a CAL FIRE grant and also seed money from Napa County to do work. The way we're getting traction, the way people are knowing about us, despite our critical social media outreach, consistent multi-platform, is seeing us do work on the ground. It builds trust. They see the work. It's sort of like the pilot project you talked about. And then people are more willing to get involved. Taking that first step is always incredibly difficult. Nonetheless, you need money to start that pilot project. You need money to get the grant to start the pilot project, to hire everybody. So all of these things usually initiate with private donations, volunteer time, the all volunteer board that we had. It really takes a dedicated group of citizens. And one of the key challenges there is your time. There are not very many people who can volunteer full-time for something this large. And I think Napa County has an excellent track record. I can't speak to Sonoma County as well, although I know how well your science is and how active your community is, because Lisa McKaylee is one of my very good friends, the CEO of Pepperwood. But they have a history in Napa County of building very strong private-public partnerships. And I think one of the main reasons I got this job and was very lucky to be interviewed and receive this job was they had a very successful partnership restoring the Napa River over the last 20 years, essentially, that was funded by a tax initiative, but also shared the costs and benefits with landowners. They all had a stake in it. They had to pay for it. We had public grants. So we satisfied both private needs and public needs, but we made sure that private individuals did not pay solely to preserve the public benefit, nor did the public pay just to help a few private citizens. It was very, very important, like you said, and I'm not sure where they are in all those pillars, to be able to get people to understand that this is fair. This is fair. So at any rate, we have the plan, we have a 5-year plan, we had a year of commitment, and as we continue to pursue grants, we thought, well, this is really going to cost us not just $43 million for 5 years, but hundreds of millions over our lifetime and a change in culture to maintain this. And so one of the few major sources of durable funding is taxing. And I know that Marin County had, I believe, a property tax initiative. We decided to do sales tax initiative. It began with a discussion, an ad hoc tax committee with outside groups, including our own and some supervisors in Napa County, to try to strategize about what it would look like, what would be amenable to the voters, and how fast to roll it out. And we had initially decided to put it on the November ballot, but the need was so great, and our desire to build the match funding to attract large grants like CAL FIRE, FEMA grants, and others, was that we decided to put it on the ballot for June. So we're regrouping right now to see whether or not we're going to pursue this again in the near future while still pursuing large grants. Some of the advantages to having a durable funding source is not only can you do the long-term planning, and you can do the maintenance and monitoring, you have the feedback loop to track what is working, but there's also a lot less overhead because there's an awful lot of money that goes into getting small grants, large grants, all the different grant reporting and tracking requirements are different. And it takes an awful lot of staff time for that. And there is not often a lot of dedicated funding for that staff time, nor do the grants allow for that very much. And the public doesn't appreciate it. We have made a commitment so far, and it was absolutely doable with an all volunteer board, to put 90 cents of every dollar to work on the ground. It's incredibly important if you want to do this long term to leverage all of your resources, volunteer and otherwise, and use strategies to keep your costs low. One of the key constraints to that is making sure that you can give concierge service to your constituents, right? I made a pretty poor analogy, but I think it kind of works. If I can get people to allow us to do work on their land, first, if I can connect with them, which is what we are engaging our fire safe councils and people on the ground to do. If I can do that, I can deliver a product quickly. We did an awful lot of roadside vegetation work quickly, but I can't give the concierge service that you would expect if somebody was coming to design your home, right? It's sort of one size fits all. So if we want people to trust us, we have to have pilot projects, but if they want concierge service, it's going to take longer and be more expensive, but people may be more satisfied. So you spoke very well about that pace and scale. It really is one of the key things that we need to do is leverage the community relationships that people have in their neighborhoods. And we, as an umbrella organization, are hosting, and we're the 501c3, hosting 20 fire safe councils. That had been 14 a couple years ago, and it will probably top out at close to 30 to cover all of Napa County. We are trying to be both bottom up and top down, so that we can get that economy of scale. So that we, as the umbrella organization, are providing the fiscal sponsorship. We are providing the insurance for volunteers to work. We're vetting the contractors. We're holding the contracts so that everybody's protected, but then we're leveraging volunteers on the ground to build that community, tell us what their needs are, and collaborate with us so that it works in two ways. I was wondering if there was anything else that I thought was really important to say about grants other than the catch-22 of needing match funding. Liability is a really big issue that we all need to take into account when we start working on private lands. And so we're trying to scale ways. I think of it like a Boy Scout or Girl Scout structure with an umbrella organization, and then our fire safe councils dealing with their communities, and then individuals working together. We're sort of disseminating up and down the scale that way, so that we build that trust, so we can get more involvement, and we have people who can interface as ambassadors in their communities on behalf of Napa Firewise, and also to leverage their volunteerism. I think that is the main thing that you wanted me to talk about tonight, but I'm happy to answer other questions after we're done.
At the reception.
At the reception.
Thank
Thank you very much.
I like the way she explained, what Gretchen explained, the umbrella, visual, because that's what Fire Safe Sonoma is about, and that's what I'm gonna talk to you about. My name is Roberta McIntyre, I'm the president and CEO of Fire Safe Sonoma. We've been working in this space for around 25 years now. Carliella, in fact, was one of the founding fathers, if you will, of Fire Safe Sonoma years ago. And I'm following in her footsteps, trying to fill her shoes. She's one of my mentors. I am actually one of those knuckleheads that are a full-time worker as a volunteer. So I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I've got a long history of the fire service that I won't bore you with because the time checker will grab it. And so, so we are evolving to, we've always thought of ourselves as the umbrella organization, as the countywide Fire Safe Council, kind of sandwiched between the California Fire Safe Council and local fire safe councils and or firewise communities. And we're actually working with our board and staff, we have staff now, to kind of formalize that structure as we're evolving and finding our way in this space throughout the county. Because somebody mentioned siloing earlier, there is a lot of siloing going on in our county, and we're here to help. Siloing is not always bad, but we're here to work with those silos to try to prevent a duplication of effort and redundancies and provide consistent messaging countywide. So we work with a lot of organizations. We work with the RCDs. We work with the Sonoma Ecology Center. We work with county government. We work with state government. We work with local people on the ground. And so that's kind of our mission in the world. We hope to evolve to a place where we're doing more for local organizations, like providing blanket insurance. We're not doing that yet, but we are providing other resources currently. For example, last week, the Guerneville Fire Safe Council, they said, oh, we need to do a Zoom meeting. We don't have that. Can we use your Zoom platform to do this meeting? Absolutely. We'll make it happen. So we make it happen. And then I would like to share also, is we got funding very recently within the last year to bring on a full-time executive coordinator, which we have done. And she is just doing an outstanding job. She's actually working behind the scenes, running the YouTube live stream as we speak. One of the benefits we're providing this group. And we also have an AmeriCorps Grizzly Corps fellow, Mason, and he has been such an asset for us. We've actually been able to bring him on for another year term. So we've got, and we share him actually with the Goldwood Resource Conservation District. So we collaborate, we share resources, we work together as much as we possibly can. And I would like to report, we have our very first official volunteer. Yes, Nicole, thank you very much.
Well,
Nicole came to us a few weeks ago, I guess, and said, hey, is there a way I can volunteer? So I talked to Marika, our hired executive coordinator. I go, well, I started building the infrastructure to take them volunteers some time ago. We never really had the horsepower, the bandwidth to make it happen. Now we do. Let's do it. So we checked with our treasurer. Insurance covers it. So we're golden. We're going to put Nicole to work as fast as we can. And so that's what we're here for, is the countywide council to help you all. If you're established, we're here to help you. We're here to resource you. We're to help you write grants, get funding through the door. We can't do everything for you, but we're here to help you make things happen. If you have not formed a Fire Safe Council yet, then you can connect with us
and we can help you make that happen. And I'm thinking I see or feel some champions in the crowd here, you know, to maybe get some more local councils going in this footprint of the county. You know, if you want to do that and need help with that, we can help you with that. We actually have developed a pretty good system of doing that, getting people up and running. We got funding a few years ago from the California Council to run a pilot program to do just that. We learned from that experience. And so we're not perfect at that yet, but we are here to help you. If you have a couple, but it takes a couple champions. You know, it's kind of frustrating because every once in a while, we'll have somebody come to us and go, darn it, I want to start a local fire safety council. And of course, my first question is, why do you want to do that? I mean, just, you know, everybody else is doing it. It sounds really cool. No, that's not the answer. The answer's got to be, because we have issues in my neighborhood and we've got to do something about it. And I'm really worried about all this, but I want to do something about it. It takes 3 champions, I tell them, at least 2 champions. You've got to have you and somebody else, ideally 2 other people who are willing to put in the time, the effort, and have some longevity, you know, to stay with it. And if you can get those 3 champions, come back and we'll come out there, we'll talk to you, we'll get you up and going, we'll get you built all the way to becoming a 501c3 if that's where you want to be. If you don't want to go there or need help with that, we can be your fiscal sponsor. We've done that a number of times. We're doing it now as we speak. I think we have 2 grants, maybe more right now. I've got a whole board of all the projects we've got going on right now. There's a lot. But anyway, so we've acted as fiscal sponsor. We can do that for folks if you need a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, as long as your mission is consistent with our mission to stay legal, which I'm sure it would be. So that's what we're here for. That's what we do. www.firesafesonoma.com. You can find us. I have some handouts out front with information, kind of in a nutshell, what we do with our contact information on it. My card's out there as well. But I would be remiss if I did not thank you all for coming tonight and putting in the effort and, you know, the work, the time that you're giving up today from the rest of your life to come here and learn. And like I said, I think I feel some champions out there. They're going to be giving us
Sign up sheet you mentioned.
Yes, there is a sign-up sheet out there for the, if you want to join one of the local fire safety councils like Lynn Garrett's, Upper Northwest. And what was the other one that's represented? Diamond Mountain, thank you, sorry. Yeah, our neighbors in the county to the northwest, absolutely. Sign up, get on those lists. We're grassroots, we're volunteers, you know, we don't have sustainable funding, you know, like the tax money. We're working on that. We have a group, we've created an ad hoc committee to explore that in the future, but we're not there yet. So thank you, Dee and Dennis, for putting all this together. And once again, thank you guys all for being here. Thank you.
Stay engaged and very importantly, please stay for the reception.
Lots of food.
Lots of food and some lovely wine. So thank you again.